The signal came from a region of space no ship had charted in over 2 millennia. Coordinates scrubbed from every archive, encrypted behind dead languages and forgotten protocols. No one spoke of it. No one dared. Yet here they were, hovering at the edge of the unspoken void. They called it the planet of the dead. Not officially, of course. Officially, it didn't exist. But every civilization had its version of the myth. A ghost world. A cursed sphere floating on the fringes of known space. A place where the Terrans made their last stand. Where something ancient had been buried, not by nature, but by will. Entire empires had collapsed trying to learn more. And so, over time, the galaxy did what it always did with things it feared. It buried them in silence. Yet the crew of the Myrics had broken that silence. The vessel wasn't a warship. It was a mobile lab, manned by scientists, linguists, and explorers. Captain Vector, a stoical Lorian, had studied Terran history in secret, obsessed with a vanished species that had once terrified the stars. They had burned too hot, too fast. And then nothing, not a whisper. That alone made them worth studying. Aboard with him was Kale, a pale, feathered Zanari who had collected hundreds of human relics. To Kale, humans were more than curiosity. They were a legacy. He spoke their dead languages fluently, quoted their philosophers like sacred texts. The others considered him unhinged. Vector considered him necessary. When the planet came into view, the crew fell silent. Blackened skies stretched over a molten crust. The terrain looked tortured, as if the world itself had convulsed before death. Scorch marks spanned continents. Oceans were long evaporated. The atmosphere was thin and acidic, laced with heavy radiation. Yet beneath the surface, the scanners detected artificial structures, metal circuitry, deep fusion cores still faintly active. Landing wasn't advised. They did it anyway. The moment they stepped onto the surface, the crew felt it. A pressure in the air, not physical, but primal, as if the planet itself was aware of them. Their suits filtered the poison, but not the dread. Their first discovery was a buried structure, angular, blackened by heat, but intact. It was made of Terran alloys no species had ever replicated. Inside, long halls stretched into darkness, lined with glyphs and shattered consoles. Energy signatures flickered, weak but undeniable. There was power here, not residual. Maintained. Deeper into the ruins, they found the first corpse. Human remains, sealed in a cryo suit, perfectly preserved despite the centuries. No decay, no damage. Only the eyes, open, glassy, and staring. Kale whispered prayer from one of Earth's dead religions. Nearby, etched into the wall, were words scratched by hand. Multiple languages, different scripts, but they all said the same thing. Do not awaken the dead. Kale scanned it, stunned. This wasn't written in haste. They wanted it to last. They wanted someone to understand. Vector said nothing. He was already scanning the cryopod. The power cells were nearly depleted, but the logs showed something worse. Dozens of these pods had once lined the corridor. All but 5 were now empty. The facility led them to a central hub, a chamber humming with energy. In its center stood a stasis vault, far more advanced than anything the rest of the galaxy had seen. Energy readings indicated something inside. It was still alive. They debated opening it. Kale insisted it was an opportunity. Vector demanded caution. The crew's medic suggested extraction and study. But the decision was made for them. A soft chime echoed. A beacon, long dormant, triggered by their presence. The vault pulsed once, then powered down. The seals hissed open. But inside there was no body, only a datapad. Ancient, scarred, but active. Vector picked it up. The screen flickered, then stabilized. A face appeared, human. Male, scarred, exhausted, dressed in a uniform with faded insignia. His voice cracked through static. If you're seeing this, he said, then you've breached our final defense. Congratulations. You're either incredibly brave or catastrophically foolish. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The recording continued. We're gone. Mostly. Not because they killed us. Because we wouldn't let them. This world isn't a grave. It's a seal. We burned everything to keep it shut. Don't dig deeper. Don't try to understand. Just leave. His eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, intense and unnatural. If you don't, the dead won't be the only ones buried here. The message ended. The datapad went dark. Suddenly, alarms shrieked from their suits. A power spike from beneath them. Multiple sources. Something was waking up. A tremor rocked the facility. Lights flickered. Deep below, movement registered. Not mechanical. Not seismic. Biological. Kale stared at the screen. There were thousands of these pods. What if some didn't die? Vector spoke quietly. Worse. Well, they changed. They ordered immediate retreat. The crew raced back toward the shuttle. But the scanners didn't stop screaming. Power surges tracked them. Adaptive, focused, intentional. The moment they reached the surface, the skies darkened. A storm, impossible to predict, swept in. Radioactive lightning. Winds too sharp for any known pattern. Their ship's shielding held barely. But the damage had been done. Something knew they were there now. As they broke orbit, Vector stared down at the planet. He didn't feel triumph. Only the weight of something too large to grasp. Whatever had happened here wasn't over. Kale sat across from him, staring at the datapad. They tried to warn us. Vector looked out the viewport one last time. No, they tried to warn the galaxy. Behind them, deep in the black, the world pulsed once. Just once, as if exhaling. And then silence. The crew didn't sleep. Back aboard the Myrics, tension filled every corridor. The datapad's warning played on repeat in their minds. The human's face, his calm, deliberate tone, was more chilling than any scream. Kale isolated the datapad in a containment chamber and began the decryption process. Though ancient, it was protected by encryption protocols still beyond the reach of galactic computing. He bypassed them anyway, piece by piece. The deeper he dug, the stranger it got. The first decrypted file was a log entry. Earth is gone. We made sure of it, not because we were conquered, but because what we became could never be allowed to spread. The entry ended abruptly. Another file revealed a series of tactical simulations. Human cities, fleets, even continents destroyed not by enemy weapons, but by human hands. Scorched Earth, mass denial strategies, self-inflicted annihilation designed not to win, but to leave nothing behind. Alien empires had recorded glimpses of the war's outcome, but not its strategy. No one imagined a species would choose extinction over defeat. The simulations weren't theoretical. They were recordings. Vector watched in silence. They didn't just fight to survive. They fought to erase themselves. Kale leaned forward. No, to erase something worse. Buried in the next layer of data were details of an operation. Project Revenant. A phrase repeated over and over. If we fall, we rise again. Genetic augmentation. Neural reinforcement. Consciousness replication. A program born in desperation. At the peak of their war, humans had begun experimenting with post-mortem cognition. Soldiers designed to remain active even after death. Not undead. Not AI. Something else. Consciousness stabilized and preserved within a hybrid framework of flesh, machine, and something unnamed. The logs referred to these beings as revenants. There was no mention of how many had been made, only that once initiated, the process could not be reversed. Their creators called them the final defense, the final punishment. Another video played. A researcher, gaunt and sleepless, stared into the lens. We thought we could control it. We designed it to contain itself, to follow last commands. But it's adapting. Each iteration is smarter, less predictable. He looked over his shoulder, whispered something unintelligible, then stared back. If this message is recovered, burn everything. Don't look for us. Don't try to help. End of log. Kale sat frozen. They turned their dead into weapons. Vector nodded slowly. Not just weapons. Judges. Executioners. Down in the lab, the preserved human body had begun to change. Not decay, shift, muscle fibers realigning, temperature rising. Its eyes remained open. The ship's medical AI flagged the pod as active. That shouldn't have been possible. The body was 2,000 years old. In the mess hall, two engineers argued. One wanted to destroy the samples, wipe the data, and leave the system. The other demanded they stay. There was too much knowledge here. Technologies a galaxy could reverse engineer. They didn't come all this way to turn back now. The debate ended when the lights flickered. For a moment, just a second, gravity inverted, then returned. The ship's systems logged a minor fluctuation. Origin unknown. Kale ignored it. He had uncovered one final file. A message, encoded in 37 languages, including the dominant tongues of species that hadn't existed during the time of humans. It was a farewell, a curse, a warning. We chose the darkness, so you wouldn't have to. If this file is active, then someone has desecrated our tomb. Know this, we were not buried. We buried ourselves, alive, aware, willing. One crew member vomited. Another walked out and didn't return. Tensions grew with every passing hour. The scans from the planet worsened. Radiation levels had increased, but not naturally. Power grids once dormant were now active. Energy surges mapped a pattern across the surface. Lines forming geometric shapes large enough to span hundreds of kilometers. Human designs. Ritualistic. Coordinated. Kale matched the patterns to human psychology studies. Neural circuit diagrams, belief systems, ancient glyphs. They weren't just building weapons, he whispered. They were building symbols. Anchors. Vector stepped in. Anchors for what? Kale looked up. Themselves. The human log had said they didn't die, that they evolved. Not biologically. Existentially. The revenants weren't people anymore. Not soldiers. Not ghosts. They were human intent, locked into machines, imprinted on infrastructure. They were still thinking, still planning. Even now, the crew's navigator found traces of low-frequency signals broadcasting from the surface. At first, they thought it was noise, but Kale ran it through a reconstructed human cipher and got a single word: observe. The message had been repeating since they arrived. Elsewhere in the ship, another cryopod went dark. The body inside, gone. No breach. No alarm. Just absence. The Mirrex was locked down. Every airlock sealed. Vector armed the defense protocols. Still, something moved within the walls. They reviewed internal security footage. It showed a flash, just a blur between two hallway frames. Not fast. Not invisible. Simply unnoticed. Too perfectly unnoticed. The crew gathered in the central chamber. Kale made a case to leave immediately. Vector agreed, but the engines had already entered a dormant phase. Not mechanical failure, manual override. By whom? Another message arrived. Not through external comms. From inside the ship system. Text only. You are not the first. You won't be the last. They traced the signal. It originated from the same stasis vault they breached. Except that vault was empty. Another line of text appeared. We were your future. We chose not to be. The alien historian on board, normally composed, began to unravel. He spoke aloud, as if answering something no one else heard. When they restrained him, he screamed a phrase in ancient Terran English. They will not forgive. The crew no longer debated. They set a course to leave orbit. Kale deleted all active files in the ship's database, including the datapad logs. He hesitated before purging the last message. The face of the human appeared one final time, frozen mid-sentence. Eyes locked on Kale. With a silent nod, Kale purged it. The ship rose into the void. The planet below remained still. But they knew better now. It wasn't dead. It was dreaming, and they had just become part of that dream. The Mirrex did not make it far. Half a day out from the planet's gravity well, its engines began to fail. Not catastrophically, just subtly. Vector ordered diagnostics. Every system appeared intact, yet performance degraded with each passing minute. They were accelerating slower, maneuvering clumsier, and internal sensors couldn't agree on their trajectory. The ship's AI flagged the discrepancy. Navigation data no longer matched real-time sensor input. They weren't drifting. They were being redirected. Something's altering our path, Vector said, his voice calm. cold. Kale looked at the star charts. That's impossible. Nothing has this kind of range. Not without a fleet. But they didn't need a fleet. The force pulling them wasn't physical. It was a signal. Faint, persistent, non-directional. It wasn't dragging them back to the planet. It was pulling them somewhere else entirely, toward a region of space uncharted even by human maps. A dark coordinate embedded in the datapad's metadata. A destination hidden behind layer after layer of misdirection. They tried to shut the signal out. Cut power to communications. Disconnect external arrays. Go dark. It didn't matter. The ship turned anyway. Vector authorized override protocols. The engines responded, then overheated. Not because of system failure, because they refused to obey. Kale stared at the controls in disbelief. We're not in control anymore. We're inside something else's plan. The stars outside shifted, subtly but deliberately. Their course took them through a rift, a thin slice of warp space, like a tear-stitch closed by radiation and gravity. Beyond it lay nothing. No stars, no signals, just cold black, and then a shape, massive, not a ship, not a structure, a graveyard. Dozens, no hundreds, of vessels drifted in the void. Different species, different eras. Some still bore scorch marks. Others looked pristine, but none moved. No beacons, no life signs. The Myrick slowed as it entered the perimeter. Lights dimmed, weapons disarmed automatically. One by one, subsystems shut down, not damaged, just dismissed. In the silence, a voice spoke, not over speakers, not in anyone's ears. It bloomed inside their thoughts. Clear, direct, unmistakably human. You came looking for us. So, look. The viewport lit up. Holographic projections unfolded like layers of history. Images, sound, motion. Events from the final days of a human era. But this was no memorial. This was a confession. They saw Earth dying. Cities crumbling. Skies blackening. Oceans boiling. Not from war, but from decision. The humans hadn't lost. They had walked off the galactic stage. The Revenant Protocol was their masterpiece. Not a defense system, a crucible, a way to refine human consciousness beyond flesh, beyond even code. It harvested traits, ruthlessness, love, sacrifice, vengeance, and forged entities that could survive beyond entropy itself. The Revenants weren't just post-human. They were metahuman. Consciousness given purpose and permanence. Vector gritted his teeth. This is an evolution. It's madness. But the voice returned unfazed. We became what we had to. You mistake our silence for defeat. It was restraint. Kale felt it now. Pressure on the edge of his mind. Memories not his own. Images from Earth's final wars. Children with rifles. Elders detonating fusion bombs under alien command ships. Families voting to destroy entire continents rather than surrender. Not because they were suicidal, but because they believed no future was better than one without freedom. Another projection emerged. Detailed logs of alien fleets that had once besieged Earth. All of them now floating wrecks. Silent. Nameless. Kale whispered. They didn't just win. They erased the memory of their enemies. The ship jerked. Gravity cut for a moment, then slammed back. Outside, one of the derelict ships began to move. No thrusters. No heat. Just motion. It turned toward the Myrics. Lights bloomed across its hull. Symbols, all human. Yet none matched known scripts. Kale recognized the pattern. It was a time-lock cipher. A language designed to evolve as it was read. Self-assembling meaning. He ran it through the databank. The message was short. You are guests, but not uninvited. Vector narrowed his eyes. Why show us this? The voice replied. Because someone must remember. History is a weapon. You buried us to feel safe. But safety breeds ignorance. Another pulse rippled through space. The Myrics shuddered. Engines returned online, fully functional. Controls responded, but the course ahead was fixed. They were being guided through the graveyard toward a single structure at the center, a monolith, a construct too large to measure, forged from elements not found on any known planet. It wasn't a building. It was a repository, a library, a bunker, a vault of culture and horror. The Myrics docked automatically. Vectar ordered only Kale and himself to board. The rest stayed behind, weapons ready, even if they wouldn't help. Inside, the monolith was endless, walls inscribed with text, each word burning into memory. They passed artifacts, human relics preserved with reverence, a child's doll, a broken wedding band, a military insignia melted into bone. Kale's breath caught. These are memories. The voice spoke again. We couldn't save ourselves, so we saved the truth. A chamber opened before them. A throne stood empty at its center, surrounded by projections of Earth, reconstructed in perfect detail. The forests, the oceans, the cities, and then its destruction again and again, not as punishment, but ritual. The Revenants relived it over and over, to never forget what they chose to protect. The final projection was a choice. You may leave. If you do, we will erase your presence. You will remember nothing. Not us, not this, or you may carry it. The memory, the warning, the weight. Kale turned to Vectar. We can't bury this again. But Vectar saw further. What if that's what they want? Not remembrance, propagation, silence. Then the voice again, softer now. Your species will face what we faced, and you will choose as we did, or worse. We offer no judgment, only foresight. Kale stepped forward. I'll carry it. The chamber responded. Light encased him. Symbols flowed into his mind. Languages, emotions, truths too large to articulate. The Revenants had not sought vengeance. They had created a mirror, and now, Kale was its reflection. The monolith powered down. The path home opened. The Myrics departed. The graveyard faded behind them, cloaked once more in silence. But nothing would be the same again. The Myrics was alone again in the void, the vast emptiness stretching before them, unbroken by the echo of ancient warnings. The crew moved in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts, processing what they had witnessed and what they had learned. Kale sat at the helm, eyes locked on the starless black ahead. His mind was a maelstrom of fragmented memories, faces, and symbols. He could still feel them, those Revenants, alive, watching, waiting. The knowledge they had implanted in him was both a gift and a curse, a constant pressure he could not escape. But worse than that was the understanding that the cycle was never truly broken. They had erased the past, only to recreate it. Vectar approached, his expression unreadable. Do you regret it? Vectar asked, his voice low. Kale didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. Regret was a luxury for those who had choices. The Revenants had not regretted their actions. They had simply understood what had to be done. What they had created was no longer human, but something beyond. Something that could live, adapt, and survive in the ashes of everything that came before. It was not about hope, nor even survival. It was about continuity. We don't have the luxury of turning back, Kale replied at last, his voice hollow. I took it with me. Vectar nodded, but the tension between them was palpable. The aliens people had never faced such a crossroads, never had to make such a choice. They had their own histories of warfare, of destruction, but nothing on this scale. Nothing like humanity's self-inflicted end. The Revenants had given up everything, all to preserve a legacy that only they could understand. Are we going to tell them? Vectar asked, referring to the rest of the crew. Kale hesitated. The answer was more complicated than Vectar realized. The crew hadn't experienced what Kale had. They hadn't seen the destruction, the rebirth, the cycle of life and death. They hadn't felt the weight of it, the burden of knowing that one day humanity would rise again, perhaps not as saviors, but as something far more terrifying. He thought of the faces of the Revenants, their eyes devoid of emotion, the cold clarity in their words. They had not sought to conquer the galaxy. They had sought only to endure, to remember, to ensure that their legacy would not be lost in the pages of history. The cycle would continue, and humanity's curse would remain unbroken. No, Kale said quietly. We don't tell them. Not yet. Vectar studied him for a long moment, then nodded in agreement. The choice to carry this burden alone had already been made. But Kale knew that it would not last forever. The truth would find its way to the rest of the crew eventually. They would demand answers, and Kale would have no choice but to give them the truth. The Revenants had not just been a warning. They had been a promise, and Kale had become part of it. Weeks passed in silence. The Myrics moved through the galaxy, its crew continuing their tasks with mechanical precision. But something had changed. It wasn't just the ship or the crew. It was the way the universe felt. Every star they passed, every planet they saw, seemed a little emptier, a little more distant. The Revenants had taught Kale that history wasn't linear. It was cyclical, and somewhere deep in the future, humanity would face its reckoning again. No one spoke of the planet of the dead. No one mentioned the messages, the warnings, or the knowledge that now resided within Kale's mind. They continued their mission as if nothing had happened. But it was impossible to ignore the sense of unease that lingered. It was as though they were being watched, though no one could explain by whom. And then one day, the comms flickered to life. A message received from an uncharted planet on the far side of the galaxy. The voice was human, but not one they recognized. "You shouldn't have come," it said, the words echoing through the ship's speakers. "You should have stayed away." Kale's blood ran cold. The message was faint, barely audible, but its intent was unmistakable. Whoever had sent it knew. They knew everything. The cycle was beginning again, and this time they wouldn't be able to stop it. The crew gathered on the bridge, the air thick with uncertainty. The voice on the comms was clear now, repeating the warning. "You shouldn't have come. You are not the first." Vector stood next to Kale, a grim expression on his face. The aliens' people were skilled in warfare and strategy, but even they could not prepare for what Kale had witnessed. They could not understand the weight of human history, the darkness that had followed them across the stars. "We're too far in," Kale muttered, his hand shaking. "We can't go back." The voice continued, growing more insistent. "We are everywhere. You carry the truth now, but it is not yours to keep. You will join us, whether you like it or not." Kale turned away, his mind racing. The Revenants had seen this moment coming. They had known someone would find their legacy. They had known someone would remember. The message cut off abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. But the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of something immense, something ancient. The Revenants were waiting, and Kale could feel them, deep in his mind, their presence like a shadow lingering just behind his thoughts. The Myrics continued its journey through the galaxy, but Kale no longer saw it as a ship. It was a tomb, a vessel for the forgotten, a home for those who had passed, but not fully left, and he knew, in the deepest part of his soul, that they would never truly escape what they had uncovered. The truth had a way of finding those who were meant to carry it, and Kale had learned the hard way. Some truths could never be buried. Humanity's final choice was not theirs to make. It was a force that would rise again, no matter the cost. The Revenants were not dead. They were waiting. And now, so was Kale,